Imagine a secret so shocking it rewrites history hidden for decades, and imagine if that secret were in reality just a brilliant and sensational hoax. Back in 1983, the world of journalism and history was rocked by a piece of news that promised to change everything we thought we knew about the Third Reich and its Führer. The prestigious German weekly magazine Stern announced, with a fanfare that today we would call viral, that it had got its hands on something absolutely extraordinary: the personal diaries of Adolf Hitler. 62 notebooks bound in black imitation leather, handwritten, it was said, by the dictator himself. It was a chance to look into the twisted mind of the most feared man of the 20th century, to understand his motivations, his innermost thoughts, the decisions that had shaped an age of horror and destruction. It promised an unexpected window into his private and political life, filling black holes in historical knowledge that no other document had ever been able to fill. The announcement caused a stir. Historians, journalists, graphology experts, and even the general public flocked to the news with almost feverish excitement. The implications were enormous. What would Hitler reveal? Was it really the monster we knew, or were there unexplored nuances? The possibility of understanding the genesis of such a destructive ideology directly from the source was an irresistible attraction. Stern did not hold back investing an impressive sum of money, we are talking about millions of German marks, to secure the exclusivity. Excerpts from the diaries were immediately published, fueling the frenzy. Major international newspapers followed suit, purchasing the publication rights. Even the prestigious London Sunday Times could not resist the call, ready to print fragments of this alleged historical truth. It seemed as if the entire global community was holding its breath, awaiting the revelations that would rewrite the history books. But there was one small insignificant detail that no one, in that moment of collective euphoria, had yet grasped. It was all a gigantic, blatant, incredible hoax. Behind the facade of this epochal discovery was no historical truth, but the work of one man, a skilled con artist named Konrad Kujo. He was not a historian nor a secret archivist, but a talented forger with an innate ability to imitate almost any style of writing and to reproduce ancient documents with maniacal precision. Kuja was no stranger to the craft. He already had a decent track record of creating fake Nazi memorabilia for collectors who preferred belief to verification. But with the Hitler diaries, he had raised the bar to a whole new level, almost artistic in its boldness. His strategy was not just to copy a signature, but to create a whole series of complex, coherent, or at least apparently so, and above all, credible texts. Kujau understood that to deceive the experts, it was not enough to write Adolf Hitler on any piece of paper. He needed to construct a story, a tangible illusion. For this, he procured authentic paper from the period, yellowed sheets from the late 1930s and early 1940s. He didn't just find them, he treated them with a care that bordered on perversion. He used tea to further age the paper, giving it that worn, time-stained look that would convince anyone of their authenticity. The bindings, the materials, even the type of ink used, were chosen to deceive the most expert eye. But the real masterstroke was the calligraphy. Kujau meticulously studied Hitler's authentic writings, practicing tirelessly until he could replicate the dictator's handwriting with astonishing, almost eerie perfection. Not a simple imitation, but an embodiment of Hitler's writing style. Each notebook was meticulously compiled, filling page after page with thoughts, orders, and reflections that at first glance seemed to come from the pen of the Führer himself. His goal was not impeccable historical accuracy, but the appearance of authenticity, the right feeling that would seduce both collectors and, in this case, journalists looking for the scoop of the century. His ability to imbue these objects with an aura of antiquity and legitimacy was such that, initially, many experts were left speechless. His talent for deception was so refined that even an entire editorial staff and numerous world-renowned historians fell into his net, demonstrating how a cunning forger can exploit a thirst for knowledge and, let's face it, the rush to publish. But every house of cards, no matter how imposing, is destined to collapse. The farce of Hitler's diaries, though orchestrated with incredible mastery, did not last long. The veil of deception dissolved with a speed that left everyone speechless, revealing the fragility of an enthusiasm based more on emotion than on rigorous verification. It was the moment when science met history, unmasking a hoax that had deceived the world. Some researchers, more skeptical than others and perhaps less dazzled by the potential media hype, called for a more in-depth analysis. It wasn't enough to look at the paper and the handwriting, it was necessary to go beyond to the molecular heart of the documents, and it was precisely there that the fraud began to show its fatal cracks. The scientific expertise focused on two key elements: the chemical composition of the paper and that of the ink. The results were merciless and unequivocal. The analyses revealed traces of optical brighteners, substances that had only been introduced into paper production after the war, making it impossible for those notebooks to have been produced in the 1930s or 1940s. It was like finding a barcode on an ancient parchment. The final blow came from the ink. It was discovered to contain acrylic binders, also invented and marketed only long after the end of World War II. These modern materials, invisible to the naked eye but easily detectable with scientific instruments, were irrefutable proof that the diaries were a fake. There was no escape. The diaries weren't Hitler's at all. They were a product of the late 20th century, skillfully aged with rudimentary but effective techniques, such as the use of tea, which, however, could not fool chemistry. But the inconsistencies weren't limited to the material aspect. A closer look at the content revealed a series of gross historical errors and linguistic inconsistencies that a man like Hitler, no matter how mad, would have been unlikely to have committed. For example, historical dates and events did not match established reality. There were passages that almost seemed like a parody of Nazi thought, written by someone who had read too many history books, but without the intimate knowledge or ideological coherence of a true figure of the time. The narrative itself seemed at times forced, at times naive, far from the perverse but structured complexity of the Nazi regime. Furthermore, some signatures were so similar that they appeared to have been printed or copied, a detail that a real diary writer would never have replicated so mechanically. It was too perfect to be true, and indeed it wasn't. The revelation that the diaries were a blatant hoax was a bolt from the blue, shaking the foundations of world journalism and leaving a legacy of shame and disbelief. For Stern magazine, the scandal was a devastating blow, a public humiliation of epical proportions. The reputation of the newspaper, once considered a pillar of German journalism, was shattered. Millions of marks had been spent on a fake, and the credibility built up over years of dedicated work vanished in an instant, leaving behind a shadow of amateurism and superficiality. It wasn't just a financial or image issue, it was a deep wound in public trust in the media. If such an important magazine could fall for such a scam, what could one believe? The case of the Hitler diaries quickly became a warning, a striking example of the vulnerability of journalism, especially when the search for a sensational scoop prevails over rigorous verification of sources. He demonstrated how difficult it is, even for qualified experts, to distinguish truth from falsehood when the deception is cunningly orchestrated, and the thirst for news is insatiable. The story was not only about a man who had deceived the world, but also about a system that for a moment had let its guard down. Konrad Kujau, the forger, ended up in prison, but his hoax went down in history as one of the greatest and most audacious journalistic hoaxes of all time. His story is a demonstration of the power of fraud, capable of deceiving not only the public but also an entire chain of experts and the media. This scandal reminds us even today of the vital importance of critical thinking, cross checking sources, and the need to never be blinded by the prospect of a revelation that is too good to be true. It is a lesson that resonates strongly not only for historians and journalists, but for all of us, in an age where fake news and manipulated information are the order of the day. It teaches us that the truth may sometimes be uncomfortable and less fascinating than a well told lie, but it is the only solid foundation on which to build our understanding of the world. The story of Hitler's fake diaries is a timeless reminder that illusion can be powerful, but reality always finds a way to emerge in the end. And sometimes this reality is much more humble and ironic than we ever imagined. If this story of deception and truth has fascinated you, don't miss our next in depth look at the biggest scams in history.